Wednesday, my dudes, and that means another episode of How to Get Away with Meta. Before we crack into it, my name is Phil Birch from Unfun Stuff, and I'm kind of going to be taking you through this wild journey while we talk about Giro. Giro. Tons of Giro all the time. So let's see what we got to offer for this character, huh, guys? Before we get into that, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Make sure you like the video. Send me some comments, guys, and turn your notifications on if you want to see more episodes of How to Get Away with Meta and learn just a little bit more about this meta game that we've got developing during Season 2 and early Season 3. Jiro is a character that has been very strong and very prominent since the very early days of the post-Kirishima 1 errata. I would say since the early days of the format, but realistically, Kirishima 1 was much more prevalent, and Jiro just kind of was existing as a placeholder. Her online event showings were honestly very surprising because if you are unfamiliar, the character does have an errata to online play, which allows your opponent to basically see which direction you put their cards in, making it a little bit easier for them to play around your ability. Now, in person, the ability to maneuver around the top two cards of your opponent's deck, unbeknownst to them, leads to a lot of mind games, and honestly, either setting your opponent up for failure on a draw, failure on a check, or both if you play it right and your opponent doesn't play or plays right into your hand. The character is strong, consistent damage and speed pumps on the character for, we'll call it a niche package, but the package itself is full of incredibly good cards, a couple of which we're going to be talking about during this episode. Very solid 6-hand size character, pretty much holding it down at the consistent 6-hand size 27 life clip that all of the good 6-hand size characters basically have. Kirishima 2, Ochako, Jiro, like they're all sitting at that same clip of health, which is very good, right? Like it's a nice sizable 7 more than you're getting from 7-hand size characters, which is most of the time 1 more attack, which is awesome. Now we have had a couple of, I want to say, more recent showings for Jiro. I could go back to the history of Jiro and show you all of the top cuts, all of the placements, all of this, that, and the other, but it's honestly would be very difficult because the character has been incredibly consistent at making top 8s, top 16s, top 4s. It hasn't really cracked through those barriers, right? It hasn't won a tournament, but she is one of those very consistent contenders, and honestly, a very easy character to pick up. So it's super playable, right? First of all, I want to take a look at the Orlando regional where we had both a top 8 Jiro and a top 4 Jiro. Both played differently, both played by really good players, right? Jose, we're going to look at his deck first. This is Jose Naronio's Good Jiro, which was a Staff Strike Giro deck. Now, Staff Strike Giro has been around for a while, right? Like it's one of the early archetypes of Giro that got really introduced in set 1, but it wasn't as consistent. It didn't get a little bit of the same help it got from set 2. There are only a couple of set 2 cards here, but they are incredibly impactful for the play of the game. Cannon Blast took the damage of the deck from scary to devastatingly scary. Like you can see Cannon Blast at the end of strings going from like 18, 19 damage with like 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 speed. Just huge attacks on huge plays because of the consistency of the deck. And we also got Advice for Winners, which helped pass a couple more checks if need be. Now, the other deck that we would like to show you is Barry Everson's top 4 Giro deck. Barry had a phenomenal tournament. He beat me in one of the Swiss rounds, and honestly was just like a really great match the whole time. So his deck is a pretty consistent to what we are seeing from a lot of the Air Giros right now, minus the inclusion of, I do believe they usually play like Plus Ultra to like really pump something to the moon. But as you can see, it's just really consistent charge package maneuvers, and also gets the benefit of having Sports Festival Stadium add that little bit of extra damage that you typically do need in a turn, with the one burn that he adds to every single attack that hits, right? Other than that, I mean, it's Air's good cards, right? Like you put Air's good cards and card draw into a deck, you shake it up, and boom, out comes Jiro basically. The character's ability to draw just a million cards that are set up and like looked at and maneuvered around is just so phenomenal that it's hard to justify not playing like tons of card draw, right? Just tons of card draw. Anyway, guys, I want to double back and go into a little bit more of an in-depth look at Jose's Good Giro deck. So I did say it was like a staff strike deck. It's just trying to play big long strings, stuff like that. I would say that is pretty much the case, right? Like it's not reinventing the wheel of what a staff strike deck looks like. But as you can see from this deck, it has an absurd amount of card draw, right? We've got Passing the Torch, we've got Destined for Mainstream Success, Staff Strike, we've got Unwavering Slash, you know, we've got Preparing for Battle. We just have all of these incremental draw just adding up and adding up and adding up, and the goal is to realistically, if you can get a staff strike rolling and you draw a handful of cards, you're gonna see more attacks. This is a very tight list. It's 50 cards, as far as I can. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 50 cards. It's 50 or 51 cards. 14 attacks. Sure, it's a lower attack count that we're seeing in any decks these days. There are no decks playing this low number of attacks, but because of the nature of the character and the ability to just sit there and play a million cards and just draw a bunch with like Passing the Torch and stuff, you really have still got the ability to sculpt for more than one turn because Good's defense is pretty good. It's pretty good, no pun intended. And like I said, the big combo from these types of Good Giro decks is boom. Put these two cards together, right? These are both devastating, right? Staff Strike does not get damage from Jiro, right? It's not a charge. It just gets the speed because it's a weapon. So this is coming in for 7 speed, 6 damage because it's always going to be the third card you play. And sometimes it's going to be also the 5th card you play and also the 7th card you play and also the 9th card you play, depending on how hot your draws are, right? But Cannon Blast is where you see the real money because this card is a charged weapon. And we know that Jiro loves charged weapons. I mean, Unwavering Slash, charged weapon, Capturing Net is a charged weapon. Like these cards are so powerful because they can get both speed and damage from Jiro on response in a response window, right? Like that's incredible. That's insane. So we got Cannon Blast that by itself is presenting what's presenting a 7 high for 9 or 7 high for 11, right? Am I doing math right? Yeah, it's a 7 high 11, just presenting itself right there, right? And depending on where you play it in your card pool, yeah, you could lead in with Cannon Blast and it's still a huge grid attack, right? But if you throw it at the end and you're still able to give it those stats, so you're throwing at the end of a cannon or a staff strike string. And let's call it just a basic staff strike string where you play 2 cards staff strike and then 2 more cards, right? You play another charge weapon and then Cannon Blast at the end. That means it's getting 5/5 to start, so it's going to be a 9 high 10, and then it's getting +3 +6, so it's a 12 high 16, and that's crazy, right? That's super crazy. The deck presents just so much damage, but it's not that it's an uninteractable amount of damage either. The deck does have some very clear like weaknesses to resets because it's trying to just throw big attacks at the end. Making cards like You're So Obvious, Kirishima 2, and the likes just tougher to deal with. Even a very Clutch Plus Ultra can give the deck a little bit of fits. Not to mention it's very reliant on combo enhances and playing like cards into its card pool early with foundations, right? So if you have cards like Forcing Surrender, you can really gunk up the combo just slightly by making it so they have to choose either the draw or the combo enhance on Staff Strike, which might seem like it's minuscule, right? It might seem like that's not a huge deal, but them not getting to draw extra cards does help tremendously. The deck is positioned pretty well to do enough damage to kill basically anybody, right? its strengths are that it is presenting a million, right? Once its attack turn starts rolling, it is presenting to you a million damage, and you have to be able to answer that in some meaningful way, or hope that they have not got a large enough board state to just play it all anyway, right? So it's tough to deal with. You have to be able to block like the last couple of moves and just kind of ignore the front view, which makes her really strong into seven hand size characters because seven hand size characters don't really get to ignore the first couple moves. They're just not capable of doing so. But yeah, I think that pretty well covers the good Giro deck. Let's take a look again at the Air Giro deck that Barry played. Now this is like I said earlier, this is gonna be like pretty reminiscent of a lot of the Air decks you're gonna see these days. It is a very heavy charge package, which is great for Giro. She's giving them all damage, right? This is just a deck that wants to give its moves damage, and it doesn't really care about how you interact with it because it's going to try and play as many cards in its hand as possible through like readying its stuff, double jab pummels, like zero gravity lifts, things like that. It is incredibly, incredibly strong at dealing with, once again, seven hand size characters because seven hand size characters don't get to have the liberty of taking as many of these attacks for free. You're looking at a deck that when it gets Sports Festival Stadium is every attack is +1 damage. Your opponent's best blocks don't matter anymore. You can no longer breaker to him. It's very, very not necessarily tough to get through, but it's very, very offensively oriented. It's a very strong aggro deck. So if your deck isn't prepared to chain block, the Air version of Giro is much more devastating than the good one. The good one has to block a couple of key moves and hope his opponent hasn't drawn like the absolute nuts, right? There's nothing you can do if your opponent keeps ripping staff strikes, off of unwaverings, off of unwaverings, and just keeps on going, right? You can't do anything about that, but you can try and like mitigate it in slight ways by blocking the last couple big moves or resets. But like Air Giro does not care about that. Air Giro is trying to play as many attacks as possible. It's much like a Denki list in that way, except for this deck gives damage. Where Denki can clear his card pool and keep going, Giro says, here is a big fucking move, right? My home run comment gets speed and damage. I'm going to play it at the end of a string. It's going to get like 6/6. And have you got enough resources left after blocking my previous onslaught to survive this like home run comment, stuff like that. Combine that with like latent skill for draw and destined for mainstream success for draw, and you have another deck where you are drawing a million cards, and you just get to keep going. Your gas doesn't really run out. Like like I said earlier, the best way to deal with Air Giro, I think, is to be able to just string blocks together very, very consistently, very fluently. Characters like Asui are incredible against this Giro deck. Kirishima 2, once again, just very, very strong into it. Momo, some of the life symbol decks that are just great at blocking can really chain block this one out. Even if, Toga has the potential to just die from being a 7 hand size character, she also has the ability to just block every single move if she gets going. So their weaknesses are similar in that blocking is probably really like the most detrimental, but it's correct blocking. You have to figure out which blocks matter, which blocks you can get away with. I would say that the Air Giro deck has a little bit tougher of a time dealing with like big breakers, assuming you can answer Stadium in some meaningful way. If they get a Stadium out, then you're really relying on just blocks and hoping, right? Because Stadium does add an extra element of defense to the deck against your plays towards them. But yeah, I think that like I said, the introduction of Sports Festival Stadium right here really, really took this deck from like a respectable tier, right? Like probably like a high B, mid B tier to definitely like an A tier deck in my opinion, because it just allows you to go so much deeper. And like, because your strategy is just to play multiple moves, every single one of those getting even half blocked deals an extra 1 damage to your opponent. And over the course of the game, that can present an entire extra attack's worth of damage that your opponent didn't get to block, right? If you hit them with, say, 5 moves and 4 of them were partialed, well, you've got an extra 5 damage in there regardless if you have Sports Festival Stadium out. So Plus, if you combine it with cards like Zero Gravity Lift and Electric Jolt, it's just free damage in general. And that's really crazy. That's super good. But yeah, anyway, guys, I believe that is all I have to talk about on the Giro deck. The Giro decks that have been kind of not necessarily destroying the meta, but they have been showing up in consistent numbers because they are a very consistent deck to play, and they're fun to play, right? We're always going to see consistently high numbers from decks that are fun to play and can present like big numbers, because big number is fun. We love big number. Anytime you can throw a 2020 fucking cannon blast, that's cool, right? Like, everybody loves that. I've got locals who play it. I've seen Bromley playing stuff like that, Jose playing stuff like that. Like, I would not be surprised to see a bunch more cannon blast Giros in the next event. But yeah, that's all I got, guys. Once again, please like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification buttons to get notifications when I post these How to Get Away with Meta videos if you find these helpful. And then, comment. Send me comments on what you would like to see next of the meta decks, right? Like, we still have we still got, honestly, tons that we could do videos of. Even if it's just B tier characters, there are characters in the meta that I think either have a spot that we haven't explored or are in the meta that we haven't talked about. So be sure to let me know. Anyway, guys, once again, Phil Birch here from Unfun Stuff. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you again next week with another episode of How to Get Away with Meta.